Welcome to the Ask the Geographer podcast series, brought to you by the Education Department at the Royal Geographical Society with IBG. I'm Rachel, your host, and in each episode, I'll be joined by geographers from across the globe to delve into current events, publications, and research, all tied to the fascinating world of geography. In this episode of Ask the Geographer, we're looking at nature-based solutions to climate change. This is an increasingly important element of geography and links to topics such as climate change, carbon cycles and ecosystems. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Stephen Cornelius, Deputy Practice Leader and Innovation Lead for Climate Change and Energy at the Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF. Stephen has been working for the WWF for over 10 years. Before then, he worked for the British Civil Service as part of the department who managed climate change science and policy for the UK. Stephen is here to talk to us about his role and how the WWF helps promote, advise and act on responses to climate change, looking specifically at nature-based solutions. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rachel. Lovely to be here.
Before we get into the main part of this podcast, could you tell us what the WWF do and your role within it?
Yeah, certainly. So WWF is the largest conservation organisation in the world, and we have a black and white panda logo that's one of the most recognised brands globally. We operate in around 100 countries, have over 5 million supporters, and we work at different levels to protect nature and help people live sustainably on our planet. So I have colleagues who work on the ground conservation with communities in the Amazon, in the Arctic Circle, in the Himalayan mountains. So we work all over the place. I work with, we have great scientists who do thought leadership and publish research. We work with big businesses and we push them to do more defined solutions that reduce carbon emissions. And a big part of what we do is we advocate to governments. We push governments, for example, around the annual climate COP. And in some countries, we push for stronger domestic and environmental laws. So we work on a lot of areas. We work on forests and oceans and freshwater systems, and we work on wildlife and biodiversity protection and food systems. And we also work on climate change, and that's where I come in. And we do this because climate change poses a fundamental existential threat to wildlife and ecosystems and the human communities that we aim to protect. If you think about what it is that causes nature loss and species extinction, it's things like ecosystem conversion, so deforestation, chopping down trees to make space for agriculture. It's pollution, plastics and other waste entering the ocean, and climate change is another one of those big drivers. So in my job, I help work and shape WWF's strategy on climate change, working on everything from international climate policy. So I work on energy transition, corporate net zero, nature-based solutions, adaptation, and how we work with other organisations. So lots and lots of things we work on.
Thank you for summarising such a massive organisation in a short bit there. You picked up on nature-based solutions. For those of us who may be hearing that term for the first time, can you explain what was meant by nature-based solutions to climate change?
First of all, I want to highlight that climate change is caused by human activity. And so the gradual warming of our planet is the result of a buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And we are already observing impacts of climate change. So global warming leads to increased climate-related hazards such as heat waves and stronger cyclones and changing rainfall patterns, heavier rainfall or more severe drought. And fossil fuels are the biggest driver of climate change. So burning of coal, oil, gas, that's about 3/4 of man-made greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to do something about transitioning away from these polluting fossil fuels and into renewables. The other quarter or so of emissions are from agriculture, forestry, other land use. So we have to deal with both the fossil emissions and the land-based emissions if we are going to limit global warming. So, the level 1.5 degrees Celsius as decided in the Paris Agreement 10 years ago. So if you think about nature-based solutions, we see nature as a critical and undervalued ally in the fight against climate change. So it helps us slow global warming and adapt to the impacts that are affecting communities around the world. So the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, provides authoritative assessments of scientific information on climate change every few years. And the IPCC has highlighted that healthy ecosystems absorbed over half of human-emitted carbon dioxide over the past decade. And that's into the vegetation and into the soils and into the ocean. They're called carbon sinks. And so nature basically helps slow global warming because that carbon dioxide is not in the atmosphere. Nature also provides a buffer against extremes. So, for example, healthy wetlands and coral reefs can help shield community from climate-related hazards such as larger storm surges. Now, nature-based solutions are ways of tackling climate change by working with nature rather than against it. I've got a definition that the UN has, and it's long. It's a long definition. So, nature-based solutions are actions to protect, conserve, restore, sustainably use, and manage natural or modified terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, and marine ecosystems, which address social, economic, and environmental challenges effectively and adaptively, while simultaneously providing human well-being, ecosystem services, and resilience and biodiversity benefits. So that's a long definition, but it's, in its essence, it's about using the power of nature. It's having a problem-solving approach to address these so-called societal challenges, and it has this sort of triple benefit to people, to nature, and to climate.
So does the WWF work in partnership with any other organisations, with the mind that two organisations or more than one organisation is better than one single voice? And if you do, could you give us an example of that, please?
Yeah, so we work with lots of organisations, but we've got a partnership that we've had for 5 years now with the IFRC, and that's the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And so our partnership with the Red Cross is on nature-based solutions for climate change, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. So you've got the world's largest conservation organisation and the world's largest humanitarian organisation working together on this. And we do so in around 25 countries, such as Kenya, Fiji, Malaysia, and the Netherlands. So I think, we work on various projects, on fundraising, on thought leadership around nature-based solutions.
Could you share us an example of a successful nature-based solution project that WWF has been involved in, and what made it so effective?
I think, first of all, with nature-based solutions, I think we've realised a few things. So we can't tackle climate change by cutting emissions alone. So as I said before, this energy transition from fossil to renewables is critical. And we also need to protect and restore natural ecosystems, so to hold on to the carbon to bring more down. So examples of natural systems that can help shield us from climate hazards are things like mangroves and coastal wetlands. So they act as a natural living seawall. So the root systems bind the soil together. They prevent coastal erosion. The trunks and the leaves absorb the wave energy. So we know mangroves can reduce the height of wave height by 2/3. So they can shield coastal communities from the impact of storm surges. Examples like forests and reforestation. If you have forests on steep terrain, the roots they're essential for protecting against landslides and flash floods. So the roots anchor the soil. They prevent it from turning to mudslides during extreme rainfall, and the soils that have these roots in them act more as a sponge, and they can slow the flow of water into rivers and reduce the intensity of downstream floods. And another example is in cities. They're important in cities. So trees are really important in cities. There's a phenomenon called the urban heat island effect, where the buildings and the concrete and the roads, they absorb the solar energy. And so cities experience higher temperatures than the surrounding rural areas. It can be a couple of degrees warmer, 10 degrees at night. And natural systems can combat this urban heat island effect. So you have trees and you have parks and you have green roofs, and that cools the surrounding area through the shade and through the water vapor being released through the leaves. And so healthy, mature trees can provide essentially cooling power that reduce heat-related stress and lower energy consumption. So, what makes them successful, I guess, is community involvement and good planning.
On the other side then, what risks do you see there being if nature-based solutions aren't properly planned or used as a quick fix?
Planning is really important. If nature-based solutions aren't planned properly, they could do more harm than good. And I guess arguably you wouldn't call it a nature-based solution if that's the case. So examples could be if you plant trees on a naturally treeless ecosystem, such as peatlands or grasslands. So you could destroy the existing carbon sinks and release more carbon than the trees will ever sequester. A big risk is that nature-based solutions are used by corporations and governments to say, we're net zero, we're climate neutral, but they're continuing business as usual pollution with fossil fuels. So it's the risk is that you're distracting from the urgent need to decarbonize industrial sectors. And, another risk is if you don't involve people who live there, you can create conflicts or projects could fail completely. So I think the risk isn't the nature itself, it's the rushing in without proper science or the long-term thinking or the community support or the planning.
So it's very much about being able to plan and think things through before a reaction, which is quite a hard balance when there seems to be quite an urgency around climate change and having solutions from that and asking organisations to do that.
Yeah, so I think it is a balance, but you need to have this planning and this community engagement, because we see that I think projects that have that planning and that engagement are more likely to succeed than ones that don't.
As geographers, we understand in terms of the impacts of climate change, how it has on local communities. How important is it that local communities are actually involved in the nature-based solutions, and what happens when they're not?
I mean, local communities are essential. They know the land, they know the water and the risks and what will and won't work. And, when communities are involved, the nature-based solutions will last longer and they'll deliver more benefits that fit their needs. But if they're not involved, projects that fall apart. The trees may not be cared for, or restored areas may get damaged again, or the project might even harm people's livelihoods. So involving community isn't just the nice thing to do. It's a smart thing to do and necessary if you want a real lasting climate solution.
So they are very much the key to being able to have a kind of sustainable solution.
Correct.
And just summing up, really, what would you say is the biggest takeaway that you'd like our A-level students to have from this podcast?
Nature isn't just something there to be protected. It's one of our strongest allies in fighting climate change. Protecting and restoring nature is non-negotiable if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees and to enhance human resilience to climate hazards. And I guess finally, nature-based solutions aren't a magic bullet. We also need this transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, such as wind and solar.
So it's that kind of holistic approach of looking at nature, but also through various other approaches that go around that work with nature as well.
Yeah, so there's the ones that work with nature, as you say, but as I said earlier, 3/4 of the problem of climate change is from burning fossil fuels. So we need to deal with that, but that alone is not enough. So we need to also use nature, protect nature, and help nature help us by restoring and conserving it.
Fantastic. And for those students that are interested in climate and conservation, what skills or pathways would you recommend that they explore?
There's heaps of ways into climate change and conservation work. And I mean, my personal journey was through chemical engineering and a PhD in control engineering on pollution from cars. And, I worked as an automotive engineer and then joined the UK government working on climate science and policy and climate negotiations before joining WWF. So it's a long route. I'd say, if you love science, subjects like biology and geography, environmental science, climate modeling, they're great pathways in. Skills like communication, like storytelling is really important. Economics, working with communities, that's important. I've got colleagues who are vets, I've got other colleagues who are rangers. Climate change work, conservation work needs all kinds of talents, and I think there is a path that fits whatever you're passionate in.
So breaking that echo chamber and making sure that there is diverse voices coming in and looking at climate change from different angles is incredibly important.
I think that's true in the UK, and I think that's true globally.
Stephen, thank you again for joining us today and sharing with us your insights on nature-based solutions from the perspective of such a well-known organisation such as the WWF. We hope the examples you have used help to develop understanding of this important area in geography and that our students can use it to continue their knowledge further. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to the Ask the Geographer podcast series on soundcloud.com or your preferred streaming platform. Dive deeper into the world of geography and stay informed with our wide range of resources, many of which are available for free. School membership grants access to even more resources, including online lectures and supporting materials for both teachers and learners. Explore our resources and discover our additional offers for education at www.rgs.org/schools.